So Eric, thank you so much for already spending some time with us. We had a very productive conversation. So there's Jodie also here. So Eric, you working with the Vibrant Data Lab, what do you guys do in general?
Yeah. In general, we are trying to help the money going to climate solutions to be more effectively distributed. And so by that, we're building open source data tools to try to track where's the money going, who's doing what, and who's funding what.
And so you told me about this amazing tool that you're working, which is about particular climate funding. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, we're one of the tools that we've been creating is this is called the Climate Finance Tracker, and we try to track. These are to U.S. based companies that are working on climate solutions, both for-profit companies and nonprofits, tracking about 10,000 companies that were funded in the past 5 years, and trying to understand the patterns of who's funding what, so we can better identify funding gaps and opportunities.
Right. And so doing that, like what did you find out? Like how is it evolving over time? Do you find that there's more funding coming for climate science or climate industrial solution? Is it mostly philanthropic that is growing? Is it mostly private? What do you see?
Yeah, well, the private funding like dwarfs philanthropy by orders of magnitude, all the investments. But most of it, like climate is change is a thing where we actually know what the solutions are required to solve it. There's many frameworks out there, and if you look at those, like Project Drawdown or One Earth and others, that we have to tackle the energy system, energy mobility, achieve 100% energy, renewable energy and mobility. We have to fix the food system to be net zero, and we have to protect and restore 50% of terrestrial and coastal ecosystems. And there's a lot of solutions to do in there, and it all needs to happen. But if you look at where the money is flowing, most of it is very concentrated in a few areas. Like there's tons of money, that about 80% of the money goes to the energy and mobility sector. Less than 1% of venture goes to nature-based solutions. Um, and um, and uh, and actually it's the only area where philanthropy is greater than venture investments. And then even within energy, about 40% of all the energy funding goes to electric transportation and solar power. And yet, if you look at what needs to be done, there's no money barely going to uh, how do you get the renewable power from the sun to the vehicles? So like innovations in the grid and storage systems and all the rest. And so all these things like the emissions reduction potential of funding electric vehicles is only realized if you can actually get renewable power to them. Otherwise, everybody's driving coal-powered electric cars. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the things we see really commonly, that the funding tends to run towards a couple of areas, and then there's a lot of gaps. And if those gaps are not filled, then the emissions reduction potential of the other solutions will never be realized.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing in the agricultural system. About 40% of the investments in agriculture go to plant-based meat technology, and digital agriculture like crop optimization and indoor farming. And that's great. There's been a lot of, we need to shift away from animal protein, but there's almost no money going to basic regenerative cropland solutions that would help generate net zero plants to feed the plant-based meats. So
Mm.
so all of the soy milk that you're drinking, all the oat milk you're drinking is created from industrially produced oats and soy, that has like huge emissions, more than it should. And so those are the kinds of funding gaps we see everywhere throughout the system. And part of our role is to help shine a light on those underfunded gaps so that those who want to have impact can funnel money to fill the holes.
Mm-hmm. So
So yeah, the way I see
okay.
it is like without the big picture, it's like we live in this big house with 100 rooms,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to clean the entire house, not just one room. Like we got to clean it all, right? And move. And people are showing up to help, and everybody's hanging out in the kitchen, right? And it's like they're coming to the work party, and yet there's all these rooms that need to be cleaned, and there's no there's no live cams in every room to show people like if you come to help, like where should you go to help out where you could have more impact than hanging out in the kitchen. Uh,
Mm. My perception was that when you're talking about like all the funding going to electric mobility, is that it goes with the belief that oh, if you invest into those areas that are more like trending, then there's going to be more return. It's almost like a greater fool's, theory. It's like people invest and the value goes up, and then everybody's just
yeah.
sort of like,
Right, right,
and
right. And so
uh,
that's the nature, and yeah, and that's why those that want to have an impact need to go in the other direction, and they need to
right.
go where the hole, and those holes tend to be riskier, and so they need to be patient and not expect the same return. So there's only like some little corners of the problem right now for which there's money to be made, where it's really profitable to invest in it. And there's other areas that are just not profitable to solve. And
Mhm.
that's where we need other kind of money in those areas. Because
Right.
otherwise the impact potential of the other money will never be realized.
Mhm.
And it's, I mean, the other way to look at it is if you imagine that the problem you're trying to solve, I mean, I'm an ecologist, so I think about it this way, like that you're trying to grow a tree and you know it needs sun and water and nitrogen and phosphorus to grow, then you could find a great water company and fund it. It has a lot of, it's like super effective at watering, it scales and it can scale globally. But if that's all you do, the tree will die. Like it also needs sunlight and it needs nitrogen and it needs phosphorus. And you could have you could have everything but phosphorus and it will still die. So like so you need to kind of like look at all the like for this big problem that we have to solve, what are all those critical solutions and see the big picture of like where's the money going and where's it not going? Because what's the most important is what's missing.
And so because a tree, I think, is a good analogy, needs all these different things, that makes it also, it gives us a sense of direction of what kind of data we should be focusing. But at the same time, it tells us we have to get all these data, not just one piece of it, right? If we want to understand how the tree works. And so,
Yeah, and you get the data that you don't think is useful, but that's useful as an outgroup, right?
right,
So like if you want to know where are the gaps in fund, if you just track venture investments, you wouldn't see without philanthropy too, you wouldn't see where's there like a missed opportunity that none of the investments are going.
right.
Like
Jody,
yeah.
should we go? Can you zoom onto the maps that on the website that Eric showed us? Yeah. So you showed us, for example, those areas that are geographical, that are
Mhm.
showing where the money is going in terms of which region and which topics. And and if you scroll down, you also showed us this map of the topics. And so
Right,
for you, when you are working with like groups like us, like NGO, you mentioned this is like funded by an NGO. A lot of people, I remember having this discussion with you like 10 years ago. You were saying that the data, you organize it, and for you, it's crystal clear, like it's in front of you, you can read it. But a lot of people who are not data scientists or used to work with graph,
right.
it's your brain that is the real gold. The data is just half of the answer, right?
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I mean that's what we're trying really hard to we're actually working on making some really simple dashboards that just like
Uh,
more clearly show here's a gap. And we have found that like there are a lot of people who have been they're trying to make this to be easy enough to use that it's like shopping for shoes on online where you can, there's filters on the side and you're just searching the data for something. So we're trying to make it easy to explore a little bit and those who kind of like to discover who's doing what are using it. And then a lot of people, like you say, go like, "Oh, it's really pretty, but I have no idea what to do with it." So
so
we're in the process of trying to build little simple dashboards.
what is it in the mind of a data scientist that makes you make sense of those? Is it like a pattern idea, or because you're looking for a specific question, or you're looking for the information that is not in there because there's a gap? What is in your mind, do you think, is that what most people don't, what is the block that people don't have that helps you to make sense of that?
Mm, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for me, when I'm playing around with data visually, it's like a video game where you're just trying to find something interesting or find a pattern or like notice an outlier that doesn't make sense or yeah, like so that it's like so you do a thing and you say, huh, if that's true, I wonder if, and then you keep exploring. So that's kind of how I do it. I kind of stumble into an insight rather than have it be predetermined. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's sort of like whether or not from an interface elicits curiosity, or whether it's overwhelming. And I recognize that this sometimes is overwhelming to people. Um, and usually I'm going in and just trying to search for,
Hmm.
use it as a way of visually searching a database and seeing the details in the context of the big picture. Because I always like to see the big picture at the same time.
Because I can feel like the most people would see this as an end, whereas you see it as a tool, and you use it as a tool to search for something or to produce something.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I just want to see like for example, you say we want to do this thing around climate data, and then immediately I'm like, oh, well, how many other climate data companies are out there?
Yeah.
And if I grab all those, who's funding them, and how many of them are for profits, how many of them are nonprofits? What are the topics that they span? Are they covering agriculture? Are they mostly, are they in shipping? Are they in, like, what are the examples out there, and which are the ones are potential collaborators, who would I
Mhm.
talk to? Like that's kind of the path that I go down, because immediately I want to know, how does this idea fit in the context of others, and what are the opportunities to either find funders that are aligned and find other partners to collaborate with.
I think this is fascinating what you just described, and then I think you described is almost like is the same purpose as like providing climate data, but it's like mainly like two worlds. The worlds of like for profits trying to benefit from the data itself, and the non-profit side. What if we, as an organization, we became both? I mean, because we have already the nonprofit, but we intend to also have a for-profit to actually have this flexibility and also
Yeah,
have an economic engine. And so, if you have, because you're doing a lot of this work that is really beneficial to public good, but you also have a consultancy, and so where do you trace the line? So this is a bit different from the data. It's more asking like you have this information, how
right.
where do you trace the line and when do you sell it versus when do you give it away? And how do you make that decision?
Yeah, we only, so the we try to keep this, we try to keep open and public, and the code to create it is open source. The data unfortunately currently are not, because we purchased the data, and we're
Mm,
trying to find other sources that would allow us to share the data. So there's no download button on there.
mm,
Um, and then, because it's not our data, and then we use, when we get paid to do stuff, it's more to take the same data and do more custom analyses to provide custom insights for a client that's trying to have impact in the space.
mhm,
And so the alignment comes when you pick and choose clients that are aligned with your mission to have more impact on the field, and where the questions that they bring to the table are things you didn't think to ask.
mm.
And you're like, oh, I didn't, that's a cool one. I didn't know to ask that. And then you dive in the data and you find an insight and you say, oh, wow, this could be useful for everybody. And then you can share that. So it's a way to have the contract work augment the public tool with insights that you didn't think to ask for, because you're like, I'm not an expert in climate investing, or something, or climate
Yeah.
funding.
What
So
you just mentioned, what you just mentioned is super key. I think you mentioned that sometimes you have to buy data set, and sometimes you are data visualizing some data
right.
that you do not own. This is super important for us because we're going to be in the same situation where we
Yeah.
want to show the data. Is this a legal gray area, or this is quite clear cut, and you're allowed to visualize data that is not yours, but then you don't
Well, we
share
have
the.
it in the contract. Yeah, we just have it in the contract with the data providers, that
Okay.
they agreed to what level of detail we are allowed to show.
Okay.
Because they're not used to people showing the data in this detail. Like they're used to people summarizing it into a bar chart, but you
Okay.
can't double click on the bar to see who's inside.
Right.
And so we just came up with an agreement with them, and I think the fact that this is a social mission uh, endeavor made it easier to have that contract, you know. So
Wow. So it means that for each data set that you have a contract and they have to agree before you can actually
right,
implement.
right,
Wow.
right. Yeah,
So
exactly.
just
So
for
we
this
had
map, you have how many contracts, for example, for this map?
well, this one is just a couple data sources
Okay.
that we have, the main ones, and then the other stuff we scrape it from, people's, from websites. It's more public data. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We combine public data and not, and that's where, the data is actually rendered here. like it's been transformed a lot from the original data. So at some level, we're not sharing like the raw data from,
Right.
you know, in a lot of ways from the source.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was incredible to see how you organize this complexity and also that you make it available for because I think oftentimes when we create technological instruments, it has a natural tendency to increase inequalities because people who are more technology enabled tend to have more resource and they're able to leverage those technical tools better. But my
Right.
understanding is that you're trying to counter that. So that's really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to make it transparent who's doing what, you know, and who's funding what. And like hopefully making it easier and easier to help people see that as we get better at it.
How do you wish a group like Climate Data Safe to sort of collaborate with you and maybe contribute to some of what you're doing or support what you're doing? Like, what do you think would be the dream ways that we could overlap?
Well, I just think that like everything you're talking about how to have like a distributed data system where people get rewarded for participating and providing data, and that the benefits accrue to everybody. I think that's just really fascinating, and trying to understand how that might work. Because I agree that I mean that's why we are explicitly not a startup and we don't have investors, because we don't want to be under the pressure to have exponential revenue growth, which then causes all those inequalities that you're talking about. So if there's a way to collaborate where on like how to gather this data in a way that's less dependent on these paid contracts, like paying for the data would be amazing. To, so that's my thought. Like how to,
Yeah.
because right now we want to go more global on like who's funding what organizations are tackling climate, and if we
Mhm.
could more like distributed way of gathering all the data, like what are all the organizations out there that are working on the problem, um, it'd be really, we would not be stuck with like a couple data providers that we're, you know, beholden to.
Right. Yeah, I feel in the blockchain community, like they really have those like Oracle and open markets and they're able to like in real time see all those changes and the
Mhm.
liquidity that moves from markets to markets. But I think
Right.
for like funds or climate data, those are like very much like silos and they don't really communicate, even though in practice they should be also like very fluid and liquid. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's crazy. Like this was commissioned by like a venture philanthropy group that was interested in getting into climate. They didn't do it historically, and they were like, "We have no idea who's doing what. No idea." I'm like, "That's ridiculous. Like, how can
Yeah.
like this is a big problem that you can't solve alone. The
Yeah.
only way to solve it is to know who is doing what
Yes.
and where you can fit in and fill the holes. Otherwise, it's never going to work."
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Like we're trying to re-engineer like the entire global economy from scratch intentionally. It's like it's not like just some like I know people will talk about this is like the climate revolution and we got to invest in it and all the rest. This is not like the internet, you know, like, oh, the internet's here. What are we going to do with it? This is
Mm.
like we're trying to solve a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're an
And
ecologist by background, so for you, it's got to be sort of understood at that sort of like at this level.
yeah, it's a system, and the success of one thing depends on the success of another. And we only have one try. We can't just have like a climate tech bubble that bursts and try it again and figure out in 30 years how to make money off it or whatever it is. Like it's like we don't have time.
Yeah.
It's like we got a deadline and we have one try. We can't just stumble our way through it.
Right. Okay, on that, I'm gonna stop the recording. I think this is a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much, Eric.
Oh wait, no, don't stop yet. I
Oh,
was gonna
okay.
ask, we should have like a, I was thinking obviously you should close off with kind of like a question of hope. Like what gives you hope and what drives you forward in this period of so much uncertainty and pressure?
Yeah, the main thing that gives me hope in all this is that I'm just amazed at that we actually know what to do. Like climate like there is no solution roadmap for Middle Eastern conflict. There's no solution roadmap for like how to fix the education system that like everybody agrees on. Like with climate, there's consensus on what needs to be done, like 4 or 5 different science-based roadmaps. We know what to do. So that's amazing. The money is actually moving to them, you know, which is awesome. Like there is like there's been a flow of money. We've shifted from like the Al Gore inconvenient truth days of like trying to convince people that there's a problem to now like fuck that, we're solving the problem. Like we're shining a light on what needs to be done. So that's totally new. And since that's happened, the money going to these solutions has increased, you know, tenfold. So that's exciting. And the other thing that's really exciting to me is that the only way to truly tackle any of these problems at scale, whether it's the energy system, whether it's nature, whether it's food and ag, is to address social inequality. It's the only way it works at scale. Like you can't have 100% transition to renewable energy if 100% of the people don't have access. And so this is one case where social equity and justice is not just a moral imperative, it's actually central to the solution. And so I feel like and many of those issues we've been wanting to solve of inequality solving for years, but they don't have a deadline, and climate has a deadline. And so I feel like it's a Trojan horse for solving a lot of other issues of social inequality and economic inequality, because we have to solve them to tackle climate for real. So that to me is kind of exciting. So I think of climate as like the Trojan horse that has a deadline, you know, that actually affects rich people, you know, and then so then they act, and then they have to then like they actually have to solve it. And the only way to solve it is to help everybody.
And so, for example, when the fires are happening in LA and a lot of rich people have their house burning down, is
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it's starting to
And
push
then
some threshold.
yeah, every time people try to forget about climate change, then like another thing like that happens,
Yeah.
and it touches them at home, and then they realize we need to do something. And you know, if we, yeah, I mean, there's so many levels of that. If you like, if we don't address these issues, we'll have the biggest, you know, refugee crisis in the history of human civilization. You know, like that, like it's in everybody's interest that everybody is helped. Um, so that's
Okay.
kind of what I'm excited about.
So I'll stop recording here. Thank you so
Thank
much, Eric.
you.
Thank you, Jody, for
Good to
taking
see
the
you. Yeah, let's stay in touch. Keep us posted.